I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, can you accept praise without also accepting disappointment, right? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I'm thinking sometimes people tell me that they're disappointed, and I'm thinking, I'm not disappointed in myself. I understand that I'm here to learn, and there's certain things that my soul wants to experience and to learn from. And it's not has anything to do with anybody else's thoughts or desires or their will for my own life that God has given me, you know? Um, but then I had the contradictory thought. It's like, well, you accept their praise, right? You welcome their praise, and their praise makes you feel some type of way. But then now my brain is thinking, well, is that also a form of manipulation? You know? So I don't want to overthink it too much, but it's just the idea that in everyone's life there has to be a point of rebellion, and their soul has to lead them to do certain things that they want to learn and experience while they're here, because it has to do with your own time. This is your time to live your life, to learn your particular lessons. And it doesn't have anything to do with anybody else outside of you, right? And once you start gaining that understanding, we are all accountable, by the way. It's just in our mental plane, sometimes we cast blame on others for our own life decisions that we made, right? Our rebellion can come at any time. It doesn't matter who is trying or who is playing as the authoritative figure in your life. You always have to do what is right for you. You know, we have those that are close to us to give us guidance, but even when that guidance is here, you still have to do what you think is right, right? And it's really easy because sometimes we like someone may be in resonance with us in certain aspects of our lives, right? Um, and so we honor that closeness by taking their counsel, right, their advice very to heart. But as I'm sitting here talking about this, I heard something very silently said. That's why you take everything with a grain of salt. Every single thing, right? You're not supposed to you can listen to people and be like, yes, I agree with this, I disagree with that, you know, but it has nothing to do with majority. It has nothing to do with anybody else but you. Even when you ever give advice to someone and you get upset when they don't take the advice, and you're like, why would you do that? I wouldn't do that. I would have done it this way because this and this and that, right? And it may come from a very logical point, but maybe their soul needed to experience something here on this plane for their soul journey, right? That's the part I don't think people be considering, is that your soul wants to do certain things here, wants to experience. And I said that thing before. I was like, I don't just need to experience everything, and my soul doesn't. Right? I have a particular journey or a certain path that was designed between me and God. And it goes above any egoic identity, right? And I think the egoic identities, I think we just say that, but let me break down what I'm actually talking about when I talk about the ego, right? The ego isn't your identity here on this plane, right? We all play different roles while we're here interacting with other souls on this plane, right? So you have your mother, which is an identity. You have your father, which is an identity. You have your children, right? Your sisters, your brothers. These are all ego expressions that are supposed to, I guess, give a blueprint of what role they're playing in your particular soul journey, right? Husband, wife, all of that, right? So when we say that God is above the ego expression, okay, what we're talking about is it's above the role that we're playing here on earth, right? um, it takes precedence. Your soul contract with God takes precedence over any role. That's why you forsake all others, right? Because there's an internal conversation going on which you were designed here to do and to experience, to learn your particular lessons. That's why you can't blame anyone outside of you when it comes down to certain things that your soul is supposed to do, certain things your soul choices that you're supposed to make for yourself, for your own progression. Okay, so God takes precedence over any egoic identity. So you can't blame your mom, you can't blame your father, you can't blame your children, you can't blame anybody else, because if God told you to do something, which is an internal conversation, and you don't do it because you're like, well, my mom said this, or they persuaded me to do that, right? Your friend is another. Again, these are all egoic roles that we're playing here, but something higher than that takes precedence, right? Alignment takes precedence. Okay, so I also think that it's important that we define what those roles mean to both individual parties. Okay, so what does being a mother, how do you define being a mother? Because even that may differ depending on which soul you're talking to, right? So you may have a totally different definition than your own mom, right? So, and it's supposed to be so. Everyone's supposed to be listening to their internal dialogue within, right? And then trusting the process that everyone's messaging and execution of that messaging is in divine time, right? And it may affect you on a certain plane, but it won't affect your overall mission. For example, if someone chose not to listen to their internal message that they told them to do, and they decide to be stubborn, or whatever the case may be, there's already a adjustment in the field if you hold you're true to your own resonance. Okay, I know that one may have gone over some people's heads. That's okay. You'll understand when it's time for you to understand. Okay, so that's what I was just thinking about here while I'm ripping out these seams. Take everything with a grain of salt. Okay, others' disappointment, you have to listen to what you gotta do. It has nothing to do with anybody else. But like, again, I know it's nice when people give you praise. You feel connected. You feel like, yes, I'm doing something that's in alignment. But regardless of that, if they are giving you praise, that means you're doing something, that you're listening to a particular frequency that they are also in alignment with, right? Or want for you. Okay? So you just take everything with a grain of salt. Don't get lost in it. If they're disappointed, it just means that you did something that's not in alignment with them. And again, that's okay, because they are also doing things that's not in alignment with you. Right? So our job is not here to judge others, but our judgments are a true test of who we personally are. Our judgments are for ourselves. Okay? So every advice, everything that you speak as you're playing these different roles here in your human experience, and we are all human, right? Embodying different consciousness, everything that you choose to experience. I lost my train of thought. Everything that you choose to experience is for your own life journey. Okay? So even if someone tells you that they're disappointed in you, right? They're saying that based off of their own internal compass, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing or a wrong thing, but you have to just know how to die gracefully. Okay? You have to know when to die and gain understanding, not to beat yourself up or to live in guilt, but to understand that your walk is not their walk. You got to really start trusting yourself, because you cannot, I promise you cannot seek God externally. Okay? You can't rely on that. All right? Sometimes it is shown just to see what's going on in your own internal world, but if it's not in alignment with your internal world, you could pick up on that really quickly. All right? We don't live in shame. Okay? So if somebody is trying to express shame or doubt into your field, You just gotta be like, okay, that exists, right? These things have to exist for you to recognize them and for you to realign accordingly, all right? But don't get stuck there or beat yourself up, right? The person that you need to be most worried about disappointing is yourself. The one person's voice that you should be more concerned about how, as far as praise goes, is yourself. Do you praise yourself? Do you honor yourself? Okay? Because it doesn't really matter. Then everything else is added onto you, right? What everyone else is saying externally from you, all of that's just the the aftermath of what's going on within yourself. Okay? Get it? I just thought about how every person that I've ever met, they played their roles divinely, right? I mean, both positive and negative roles that was required, right? The negative roles are required to be played in order to realign me with who I am choosing to be, right? So I'm grateful for them. You know, everyone who has played a negative role and not actually impact me so much so that they put me in a altered state of consciousness, or they undo the work that, you know, my those who laid the foundation for me to come here, right? They just had to realign me. They were like, okay, you don't really belong here. I'm grateful for all of you, right? That spoke to me in spirit, right? Those of you that spoke to me in the physical, I'm very grateful for you. I'm very grateful, right? Even if we got into a riff and I'm like, what the hell? I now understand that you had to play a particular role to get me out of a certain reality, so I don't get stuck in a certain loop, right? And I'm grateful for those who set the foundation for me beforehand, so I could recognize that and be like, hold on, this is not, something's not right. Something is not correct, right? And I had to separate accordingly. So I hope all of you who are possibly watching this, and you know that you've impacted me in both positive and negative ways, know that I understand. Okay, I gained understanding now, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Okay, thank you. All right. You guys played a certain role, and maybe I was casting some of you guys in roles that you weren't fit to play. I think that's where the misunderstanding came from. Okay, every misunderstanding is an understanding that was missed. Okay, so any problem that you have with anyone else outside of yourself, just please recognize that. All right, try, when if you can humble yourself and humble the ego, or again the role that you're playing in someone's life, to actually seek to see understanding, right? Because you know the narrative that you're saying to yourself, right? They know the narrative that they're saying to themselves. So if you guys can meet, not to repeat your own narrative, but to listen for where the miscommunication or the misunderstanding is actually being taken place, right? And I know it's hard sometimes because we get into these loops of trains of thought that's backed by evidence that we either remember. I remember that we either remember, or, you know, whatever the case may be. All right? But you got to think to yourself, is this important enough to either break the bond, sever the friendship, you know? Because you, like, again, you cannot rely on egoic identities. So if you know you have a definition of a father or a mother and they're not playing that role, you got to think to yourself, one, is it true? Are you looking at evidence of just based off a negative aspect? Or because you're so tunnel vision into thinking negatively that you don't see the actual ways they are actually fulfilling that role? That's a real conversation to have with yourself. But like, again, because sometimes we get so caught up in a certain narrative that we formulate that to be part of an identity. We attach emotion to it and it becomes solidified in our reality, right? So you got to be open to the fact that you possibly could be wrong. And if you're not open to that fact, then what I like to call it is that you don't know how to die. You got to learn how to die gracefully, all right? You got to be open. can I possibly be wrong about this? And then start from there. Not looking for evidence to verify that you are right, but you are actually humbling oneself to realize that you're actually seeking understanding so that they can be a resolution. All right? It's a choice. Everything that we do is a choice. Okay? Learn how to die gracefully. Right? Unless, I guess some of us are really, really addicted to being at war with ourselves. So, just ignore this message if that's you. But if you're seeking actual true resolution and you want to maintain certain bonds and connections in your life, you will seek understanding instead of misunderstanding. All right? That's it. Bye.